Of tonight's town hall are the 100 Black Men of Augusta, the Coca-Cola Company, IKEA, and 96.3 KISS FM radio. The focus of this town hall meeting is on voter registration and voter education. Since the 2013 Supreme Court ruling, Shelby County versus Holder, states and localities in the Deep South has aggressively pursued new laws and policies with this aim, resulting in a series of racist and systemic barriers to voter faced by Blacks, Browns, and Indigenous Americans. These barriers include long lines and closed polling places, overly broad and discriminatory purges of registered voters, overly restricted registration rules, and overt voter intimidation, among others. Stacey Abrams stated that Georgia GOP has enacted a major voter suppression law, I quote, Jim Crow 2.0, unquote. President Biden has echoed the exact same concerns. Georgia in 2018 voted to purge considerable ones of the largest mass disenfranchised efforts in the United States. History. In 2019, the state attempted to purge nearly 330,000 voters in its second largest voter purge ever. Despite the hostile climate, the minority voters and a deadly pandemic, this threatens this demographics to a greater degree than others. Voter turnout in record numbers for the historic Georgia runoff in January of 2021. With this as a backdrop, let the town hall begin. We will now have remarks from the president of the 100 Black Men of Augusta, Larry Dorr. Larry.
I think President Durr is having some technical issues.
Okay, with that in mind, we'll bring him on last then. It is my distinct honor to introduce our moderator for this town hall event, Ms. Cher Best. And what I like to do is just spend a second and read a little bit of Ms. Best's bio. Cheryl Best has it going on. She really does, literally. Her successful media career spans 18 years. Cher is a graduate of Augusta University with a BA in sociology and criminal justice and a minor in political science. Cher is a recipient of the Kappa Alpha Psi Citizen of the Year, Woman and Mentoring Girls, and is a member of the National Association for Black Female Executives. Cher is a recipient of the Georgia Women's Legislative Caucus Award. Cher is also, the Sisters Only Club was named the Association of Fundraising Professionals 2015 Outstanding Volunteer Association. Her sincere warmth, easygoing personality, and strong work ethics have endured her to fans, but sheer desire to help others is what endures her for all who met her and meets her. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Ms. Cher Best, our moderator. Ms. Best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. I appreciate that. I want to welcome everybody to the 100 Black Men of Augusta Town Hall meeting, voter registration and voter education program. And at such an important time, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is such an important time for our community to talk about voting rights and voting education. And it absolutely should be the main priority in our community. So I'm very excited for tonight and our esteemed group of panelists. I know that many of you know them personally, and we are very excited and proud to have them all being stakeholders in the city of Augusta. First of all, she did an amazing job with this past election. Stellar job, Lynn, I gotta say that to you first and foremost. She is the executive director for the Richmond County Board of Elections. Let's welcome Ms. Lynn Bailey. Wave at everybody, Lynn.
Thank you, ma'am.
And of course, good friend to all who meet him. Not only is he our Georgia State representative, but he is also a community stakeholder and one of my favorite co-hosts of the Parade of Quartets, one of the longest running gospel programs in the world. I say that. All right. I want to introduce Representative Wayne Allen.
Thank you,
Hey,
Chair.
but everybody, Wayne.
Good to see everyone.
Also, he'll be joining us a little bit later on, but he is, again, an author, a poet, but also one of the pastors of one of the largest Black churches in Augusta. Many of us call him PG, but many of us call him Pastor Charles Goodman. He'll be joining us a little bit later on. And of course, we have our former commissioner, but also representing the 100 Black men of Augusta, we have Corey Johnson, businessman, stakeholder, man in many talents, and we know you got a lot of balls in the air, but you mashed them all well. So welcome. Say hi, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
And then we are excited to have the national campaign chair of Fair Count, Mr. Reggie Abraham. Reggie, raise your hand and let everybody know who you are. Welcome.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
So great panel, a lineup we have for you, and I'm sure that as many of you have questions, we want you to ask those questions in our Q&A box. If you look down below on your Zoom screen, you'll see one box that says chat, but before that, there's one that says Q&A. So if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box, and as we complete our prepared questions, then we'll begin to move to the questions from all of you in our Q&A box. But we're going to begin with our first prepared question of the evening. The question is, define the purpose of voter education. Define the purpose of voter education. And as an organization that deals with that every day, I'm going to direct that question to Reggie Abraham from Fair Count. So Reggie, could you please define for everybody the purpose of voter education?
Certainly, and thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to participate in this panel. The purpose of voter education, certainly as we all know, is to make sure that we're empowering people with the information that they need to be able to make the type of informed choices on who they want to represent them, certainly on the national and the state level, but definitely a lot of the different offices that go across insofar as whether it's school board, whether it's county commission, and even going down to like what happens with voting districts. We want to make sure that we have voter education is about letting people know that their voice is valuable and that they actually determine who represents us in those areas. I think that voter education also is important because it allows us to be able to know, of course, that we have a voice, that we have that power, but also it helps to connect the dots insofar as like civic engagement overall. Fair Count, which was founded in 2019, one of the main things that we were founded upon was making sure that every single person is being counted for the 2020 census, but we also want to make sure that we were broadening pathways to all civic engagement for all people. So that was certainly voting, but also the census to make sure everyone's counted. And then certainly, as we'll be seeing coming up in the fall, the special session for redistricting. So making sure that number one, we're empowering people with the information of the power of their vote, but also number two, connecting the dots to help them to understand how it affects so many different parts of all of our lives, and how making sure that you show up to the ballot box and to the polls really determines certainly what's going on right now, your future, and the future of our families, our cities, and our nation.
All right, thank you. And that was Reggie Abraham from Fair Account. Lynn, you know I had to come to you with this one because you deal with it every day, 365 days. We have Lynn Bailey, who is the Executive Director for the Richmond County Board of Elections. But Lynn, define the purpose of voter education.
Well, I think Mr. Abraham stated it very well. It's definitely a way to empower yourself. You know, the last thing you want to have happen is to step into a voting booth and look at things on the ballot. You have no idea what it is, important things. And I think especially that is very, very true when it comes to the big, long questions and things that are on the ballot, but even more so drilling down to know the local people that are on the ballot and just general awareness. This year, more so perhaps than many I can remember, voter education is going to be really important as we implement the new changes that come about. I mean, we know things are in court, so we know that we may or may not have the final version of what we'll be looking at, but it's so important that voters don't take for granted the voting process. I think that it's never been more true that voters need a plan, and they need that education to develop their plan, to figure out what the best way is, the way that they're most comfortable voting, and then how to make that happen for themselves. It's important to get that information out there.
All right, Lynn, and since you already have the floor, allow me to ask you to this next question. Explain the purpose and importance, and you kind of touched on it when you answered the first one. Explain the purpose and the importance for voter registration.
Sure. Well, you know, voter registration, I guess on some levels, I look at it like an RSV to a party, you could say. You know, it's important that we know how many people to expect to vote so that we're prepared for them when they get there. So that's one important reason. But, you know, the underlying reasons, of course, are for security, to make sure that only eligible people are actually participating in the process. You know, that's part of the Constitution and part of Georgia law. And so that's as important as anything. You know, again, just like everything else, if you want to register to vote, you certainly need to make it your business to know how to do that. In Georgia, we're fortunate because we do have automatic voter registration here, which means that when you get your driver's license or do any other service through Department of Driver Services, you are automatically registered to vote unless you specifically opt out of the process. And that's been a law that's been in effect since 2016. And what we've seen since that time is the number of registered voters has just grown tremendously. In Richmond County, we're sitting right at 140,000 people registered to vote, which is by far the largest number we've ever seen.
All right, thank you, Lynn.
Sure.
This next question I would like to direct to, you know, somebody's been in politics for a really, really long time, actually both of you. But the next question, how would future elections be affected by the new voting laws, the proposed voting laws that just came out? I want to direct it first to Representative Wayne Howard, and then Corey Johnson, I'd like you to follow up after Wayne.
Well, thank you for the question. To answer, to give you from my perspective, I think it's going to depend on how much voter education we implement there. I don't think none of us know how it's going to impact negatively or positively as far as getting out to vote. We would hope that as we've just come off 2 major elections, that the confidence level of voters are high and that they'll return and the polls on the next election and in anticipation of doing the same thing that they've done in the last general election and the runoff that we had in January. So I think the voter education piece is going to be so important as it relates to having to produce an ID for absentee ballots. So churches and organizations are going to have to play a role in this, because everyone doesn't have a copier Everyone doesn't have the resources to get copies done. And if our churches and our sororities and fraternities will participate in making sure that, and start early. We can't wait until the last minute and begin to get copies made for folk that don't have access to a copier. And so the thing that's going to take to do absentee ballots, because I think Lynn can tell you, absentee ballots were a major force in the last two elections, and the runoff election, as well as the presidential election that we just finished. So it's all going to be contingent upon how we as a community educate and be proactive in getting the necessary resources available or in place for those that don't have those resources, and make sure we get it done.
All right, thank you, Representative Howard. Corey, let me ask you this. Let me add a little twist to the question, because there's so many people alarmed by this new voting law. First of all, the question was, how would future elections be affected by the new voting laws? And then let me add on top of that, what are some of the, if you have seen any, what is the most alarming thing that's in this new package to you?
Well, basically what I've observed and what I've heard and also read on this new bill, one of the key things, early voting. They're saying they're not showing it early voting, but from what I understand, in runoff elections, they are going to shorten it. So that will impede on the turnout, if you will, of the folks that are allowed to vote. Secondly, I will also add that voter participation, I think, is going to be extremely challenging because, as Representative Howard mentioned, the absentee ballot, also the ballot boxes. We know that was something that was strategically placed this year because of COVID, and given the convenience for people to be able to get out and cast their votes. So I think the biggest key, and I think when you look at anything, is convenience. People want to make sure it's convenient for them to be able to cast their votes. And what I gathered from reading this bill and trying to understand it is the convenience aspect of it is going to be restricted somewhat. And so with that being said, you won't have as much participation. Therefore, you won't have as much outcome, or the outcome, if you will, of what most people have had this past election, or what we expect to have moving forward. But I think it's important, as Representative Howard said, that we continue to educate people, because again, it's upon us to make sure that we do our due diligence to do what's necessary to make sure we're able to cast our votes. I don't want underserved communities to fall by the wayside because they don't have the adequate equipment, if you will, to make copies or to be able to do what's necessary to make sure that if they're going to be voting absentee, that they get the adequate information in there, and the absentee ballot won't be rejected. So it's several different factors. And I think primarily it's being able to allow people to vote outside of going to the ballot box or the booth itself. That's where I think is going to impede on a lot of the turnout. So hopefully, as he stated before, we can make sure that we're doing our part. I know the 100 Black Men has definitely stepped up to make sure that we educate people as it relates to the new laws, but we want to make sure as we move forward, we start educating them, into the new election, if you will, in 2022, knowing exactly what to expect and how to be prepared for it. So we won't have anybody who want to participate in the voting process denied that opportunity to do so. So that's what I gathered. And like I said, I do understand some things. I heard the governor talking about it the other day, that it was not any real significant changes. But when you look at runoff elections, and Georgia's a state that have a lot of runoffs, and I've been in quite a few of them myself, we understand that they're very important for turnouts. And if people don't have the opportunity to participate, then they won't go back out and vote again, or they're not aware of what's at stake as far as, in other words, if you voted in the primary, you must vote again in the runoff, stuff like that. That's stuff that they don't know. So we have a lot of information that we must share with people and make sure it's equally important that they know, just as well as they voted in the primary, they must come back out again and vote in the runoff. So it's a lot of work to be done, but I think this kind of convolutes that and it makes it a little bit more difficult, especially in runoff elections, for people to get out and cast their votes.
Thank you, Corey. Let me ask this next question. And I want to direct it to a number of people. How will the new laws impact specifically our community? In a general way, we know that there are some concerns about, the new voting proposed voting laws, but specifically, how will it impact the CSRA, the City of Augusta, and our surrounding areas? And as someone that gets to talk to a lot of people and hear their concerns and counsel them, I want to direct this one to Pastor Goodman. What are you hearing, and what are your thoughts on how the new laws will impact our community specifically?
Great question, Cheryl. Once again, thank you to the 100 Black Men of Augusta for putting this on, and to all the distinguished panelists for sharing. Hate that I have to go in and out, but I'm so grateful to be a part of this conversation. First of all, I will admit to you that when this bill was signed into law, it was a despairing day. I knew it was coming, but I just felt a sense of dread. That was just our own personal thing. I think, as I put in the context, in everything we went through last summer, the whole racial reckoning from November, and how we saw such tremendous strides, it was just really rough to experience what I just believe to be just simply a voter suppression bill. And I feel like it's one party trying to stack the deck because they realize that if everyone goes out, the will of the people does not matter. I think there are some troublesome things. I'll really be honest with you. I think that the Republicans in this case overshot their hand. I think that they could have been a little more covert in how they did a lot of attention. Unfortunately, over the last year, Georgia has gotten a lot of attention, and not necessarily good attention. How I feel it's going to affect us, I think there's some problematic things. I think the water issue and handing out that's just kind of minuscule. But there's another part of that bill that no one's really talking about, and that is the state legislature, which has decided that they would take power from the Secretary of State and power of the particular Board of Elections if they deem something to be wrong. That in itself is problematic, where they can decide who decides what elections. And I think that is very problematic. And that's something that I think we definitely need to keep an eye on, because let's say something happens in a Fulton County or Richmond County or Columbia County. And so the way the bill is that they can just literally go in and change the Board of Elections, put themselves over it, and then kind of go through, quote unquote, to make sure there is no discrepancies. At the end of the day, this is real problematic. And I will tell you that as this voter suppression bill went through, and Georgia's the first state, but not the only state that's going to be having a lot of these changes, it's just really sad that it was built upon a big lie, voter fraud and this kind of thing, that no one was found. It wasn't one, it wasn't two, it was 3 recounts in Georgia, and nothing was found. So to me, that's problematic. But I will tell you this, I am hopeful on this end. People of color, specifically Black people that I've been having conversations with, will make the adjustment. We'll step up. All right, you changed the election time from 7 to 7 to 9 to 5. Cool, we'll take off work. Like, I think they really overshot their hands. I really think that they did not think, that people would do it. But everyone I've talked to, they look, PG, whatever we got to do, we're going to make it happen. Like, we see how important our vote is. We see how important getting our voice out is. And so we're going to make the adjustment and do what they do. I really believe that it really set us up for what I believe is going to be a really defining political cycle in 2022. And so I think that's what's going to happen. So I'm hopeful on that end, just feeling despair based upon the fact that it even came to this point.
Thank you, Pastor Goodman. Reggie, I'd love to hear from you dealing with the census fair count. People do not like to be inconvenienced. What are your thoughts on how this new law will impact our community specifically?
I think Pastor Goodman definitely hit it on the head insofar as there may have been one desired result insofar as like maybe trying to discourage or to try to make sure that more people were not coming out. And it is not just our hope and our prayers, but the actual work on the ground of making sure that the opposite happens. insofar as motivating people. Like if exactly to his point, if there's less time to be able to do this, then let's figure out not just the messaging, but how do we need to get people there within that time or within those different times? As we see like the changes and those changes take hold and we know exactly what the law says we can and cannot do, then what is it that we can do within the law to make sure we're still getting people out? One of the things to your point about fair count is we were, from the very beginning, we were very invested in making sure that we weren't just bringing people from all around everywhere to go into a community where people just did not know them. We were very deliberate about hiring people who are in the community, from the community, doing the work on the ground. So we wanted to be able to do that because when things like this happen, you want to know exactly who you can trust to give you the right information. So since we've been working with people for the last few years, we hope that we've been able to engender a certain amount of trust through the organizers that we have on the ground throughout Georgia, particularly in like middle and southern Georgia, to be able to talk to them about some of these changes so that we can know exactly what it is we need to do and formulate a real strategy to make sure we still get people to the polls. And also working with a number of different organizations and partners about, okay, well, if this is what we need to do we need to go grab printers and go, go to different places? What is it that we practically need to do that we make sure that we're addressing all of this in a very real way, where we get to the work and we get people out? Because a number of people knew that this was coming. Now that we know that it's taken hold, to the pastor's point, it's time for us to get to work.
All right. Thank you, Reggie. Appreciate that. Reggie Abraham from Fair Count. Representative Howard, what is your take on this? How do you think the new law will specifically?
Yeah, is that addressed to me, Chair?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Representative Wayne Howard, how do you think the new law will specifically impact our community?
Well, I'm optimistic about it that, we're going to step up, as Pastor Goodman and Reggie just mentioned, and it's going to have a reverse effect on our community. We are going to, and because what I'm hearing from folks that I talk to is that, we're not going to let this, we've proven to ourselves that we can win elections. In the last two, the general and the runoff, we did record-breaking numbers of runoff in the runoff election with the Senate. And, all this is just a turn back in the hands of time when before any of us probably were ever born, when our foreparents had to go in and tell them how many pennies were in a jar, and in order to vote. And if they got the number within a certain amount, they were able to vote. We're not faced with that, but we're faced with some of the same. These Republicans are trying to put obstacles in our way and distractions. It's been proven, and they said it. There was no fraud or nothing to no signs of illegal integrity. Not what they are trying to gain. The integrity is something that that's a word that they're using. They're playing a game on words to make it seem as if we don't have the integrity. We have the integrity is there, and it's been there. And I think Lynn Bailey tell you that, as in Richmond County, there was no signs of any type of fraud, voter integrity that was ever found in Richmond County. And as you look across the state, there was, the Secretary of State said the same thing. So I think we've just got to buckle down, and we've got to prepare for what they've put in front of us, and step up to the plate. Organizations, churches, and let's be ready and prepare for what's coming.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Howard. Pastor Goodman, I'll direct it to you.
Let me just echo that. I think what you said is true, Reggie and Representative Wayne Howard. I will also say this, and when it specifically comes to our communities, I think this has also taught us every election matters. And we got to make sure that we don't just wait to presidential elections or even federal elections, that every election, local, everything matters. What I've been really pushing people to do is, even though next year is 2020 is the year of the election, we'll see some major things. We register people now. Like I'm really pushing, let's start registration now. I think that's another thing that somehow disenfranchised some of our communities, because a lot of times people talked about voter registration during the process that voting was going on. I think if we just, it's going to charge us to do it earlier. It's going to charge us to make it part. I'm going to make it just part of our routine at our church. When you join or when you do it every quarter or so, hey guys, are you registered? And make it part of it and let them know every election matters, from DA, from magistrate, from coroner. You know, that's the thing. At the end of the day, a lot of times what we see going on, and rightfully so, I think the media focuses on the federal level. But as we can see, a lot of what happens to us is on the local and state level. And a lot of times that's the numbers, those are the numbers that we need to get up. Those are the places we need to show our power in the vote. It's not just come out when it's a Senate race or presidential race. So I've really been pushing to all the people in my community and people I talk to, you need to vote every time. Every single time you need to go vote. I don't care what it is, get in line and vote, because as we've seen, a lot of the things that we've been happening has been on a local level. And that's because our numbers haven't always been strong locally, but then it's been strong when it comes to the federal level. We gotta do something really about that.
All right, thank you, Pastor Goodman, for that. Our next question is, and you know, a lot of people had this question because there seemed to be some distrust within our community about mail-in ballots, about sending their ballots in initially by mail. There was a little bit of distrust there. So how does the Postal Service impact mail-in voting? Lynn, let me address that to you. And then Corey, is someone who has ran in campaigns and had to deal with this specific particular situation. I'll come to you after Lynn Bailey.
Thank you for the question. Absentee voting by mail has everything to do with the Postal Service. From the time, that's our vehicle for getting the ballots out to people. And that's their primary vehicle, especially now with the limitations that we now have on drop boxes, as opposed to last year, where we know they've now been moved inside and the number that we can have are limited. So that part of it won't be as easy and convenient as it was in 2020. So the mail is everything. And you know, I don't know if it was a fluky thing that we saw in 2020 because of the pandemic that caused such sluggishness in the mail, but I know firsthand that ballot transit time could easily take 7 days to get from our office to a voter locally, and sometimes longer for no apparent reason. It was very, very frustrating, I think, you know, for a lot of people. So, you know, with this new legislation, the time period for applying for a ballot is shorter than it was, and the time period that we have to mail out ballots is shorter than it was. So again, I'm going to go back to making that plan, and if voting by mail is what you choose to do and what you're most comfortable with, don't wait. We now know that the last day that we can mail out ballots is going to be the second Friday or 11 days before the election. So we're not mailing out almost to election day. So if you hope to get a ballot, you need to go ahead and get that application in early, because yeah, we've got other requirements where you have to provide your driver's license and your birth date and other information that has to be verified. I expect that we will likely see perhaps a greater number of deficiencies in the information that comes to us that will stop us from being able to process it and will cause us to have to reach back out to the voters for additional information. So I think the big takeaway for me is don't wait. You know, if that's the way you want to vote, do it as soon as possible so we can get you teed up and get your ballot out the door, giving you a good chance to get it back to us.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Of course, it's Lynn Bailey, the Executive Director for Richmond County Board of Elections. And Corey, this is something that you probably had to deal with in your career as a stakeholder and a politician. I mean, tell me what your thoughts are on the Postal Service and its impact on mail-in voting.
Well, as Lynn stated, it's definitely, I mean, last year was very challenging for a lot of different aspects of just mailing or postal or whatever, shipping products or what have you. It was very challenging, and definitely with the Postal Service decline, if you will, even in workers, you know, we had so many people that decided, you know, they wanted to give it up. You had people that were just hired, and it was causing some issues with not just the mail delivery, but mails being delivered in places that they shouldn't have been delivered. Those are key things that I think that as we move forward, we're going to see some issues there, because again, until we can really shore up our postal service and the government can really step up and look at how we can be more proficient, I think it's going to continue to be a problem. It was just extremely hard last year because I had so many people I know that were mailing ballots in, and they was concerned about them reaching, you know, of course, the department in time for them to count it. And so that was a very challenging issue, if you will, for a lot of people, and it was a major concern. So most folks that I talked to said, you know what, I'm not going to put it in the mail because I didn't want to take a chance of it not reaching the Board of Elections in time and it won't be counted. You know, so those are things that I heard, and those are things that, of course, we talked about even in my campaign and with my committee on how we can help those who want to make sure that their votes are counted, and it wasn't taking a chance of their ballots being lost or displaced or what have you somewhere in the mail. So I think that's going to be a ongoing concern. I think it's something that we must continue to monitor. But again, we don't have any major control over the Postal Service. We just hope that the government can step it up, because now with so many different outlets of you know, of mailing, people are using different aspects of it. So that's going to be something that we must continue to work on and make sure that we find other means or vehicles, if you will, to make sure that if they get an absentee ballot in the mail, as Lynn stated, that they can get it back in a decent amount of time. And if it's something that's missing, that they can address that and get it counted, make sure it's counted in due time for their vote to be counted.
All right, thank you, Corey. A great answer. I want to direct this question to everybody that's on our panel tonight. And Pastor Goodman did a great job of explaining this, but I want each one of you to give me your take on it, and then I want to wrap it up with Pastor Goodman for this question. Explain the importance of midterm local voting. Reggie, I'm going to come to you first. I'm then going to go to Representative Howard. Lynn, I will come to you. Corey, I will come to you. And then Pastor Goodman, I'll come to you last. But Reggie, give us your take on the importance of midterm and local voting.
As Dr. Goodman was saying earlier, it really does affect so much. I think, of course, Fair Count is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. But what I will say is that we try to make sure that people understand that who you place in these positions directly affects what happens in your lives and the lives of members of our communities, different people that we care about. And one of the most direct ways that we are even seeing right now on television with the trial that's going on, but has been going on for the longest time, whenever it's come to, and I know this is the 100 Black Men Forum, when it's come to Black men or even Black women who are being killed, your district attorney is the one who determines not just what charges to bring, but whether or not charges will be brought at all. Like connecting those type of dots that unfortunately too many times we learn on the back end instead of knowing on the front end that we need to make ourselves aware of. It's just one of so many different examples of why it's so important to pay attention to these local, these county, these city offices, because they directly affect us. Certainly, who's on your school board as it pertains to like what's happening in your school districts, who is on your whether it's you just trying the same shared values as you to represent us on every single level, to address things that are happening in our lives. It's so very important that we do that consistently. And just echoing what the good pastor said, we should do it consistently and every single time we get a chance.
All right, thank you so much, Reggie. That's, of course, it's Reggie Abraham. He is with Fair Count. He's the National Campaign Chair of Fair Count. Representative Howard, what's your take on that question? Again, the question is explain the importance of midterm and local elections or voting, rather.
Well, I think you can take the message that Pastor Goodman gave us a few minutes ago and quoted and over again. Local elections are more important than, well, I don't say more, but they are as equally as important as a presidential election. We should learn, that's the part of voter education that we've got to do better with in teaching our constituents that the local election for corner is just as important. It had not been for this incident with Ahmaud Arbery down South Georgia, we wouldn't, there would be still folk out there that don't realize how important a DA race is. And another perfect example of that is here we, for the first time in 150 years, we elect an African-American in Richmond County, Burke County, and Columbia. And who decides that they don't want any part of it? A Republican county. So this is something that we've got to pay close attention to, and as you know, just not to pound on the Columbia County piece on the split in the circuit, but I was adamantly against that, and I'll tell anyone that that was just not good for a man, a community that for the first time elected an African-American DA to represent this whole judicial system. We fought that tooth and nail in Atlanta a few weeks ago, but when it came down to the vote, it went straight down party lines. And on this election that about the House Bill 202, Senate Bill 202, on all of these election changes, that went straight down party lines. The Democrats voted against it, and the Republicans voted for it, even if they didn't believe in it. And you can talk to some of them off record, and they'll tell you off record that they didn't really believe in it. They were obligated to vote for it just because their leadership and their caucus put it in there, made it them responsible for voting with their party. How do we break that up? We've just got what we're talking about. You know, we're not counting pennies in a jar anymore, but we are being restricted in other ways. And we've got to overcome and show them that we're not going to let these distractions stop us from voting. We're going to vote, and we're going to vote in numbers like never seen before in every election, as Pastor Goodman just said. I hope I answered the question. This thing is,
all right,
thank you. Sort of, I'm just coming out of session, and you know, these are some things that's nagging us as elected officials who really have this passion for making sure that our folks participate and get out and be educated and vote. And voting will, that's what changes all of these and things that we are faced with, this partisanship, you know, making you believe that you talk, but it's ridiculous. And we've just got to stay focused on doing we're here to do now, and that is, regardless of what distractions they put in front of us, we're going to make sure that we and people around us have the resources to vote.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Howard. Lynn, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'll just reiterate some of the comments we heard a moment ago, how important the midterms are. We'll take 2022 as an example. I mean, we've got the U.S. Senate race currently held by Senator Warnock that will be on the ballot, Governor, Secretary of State, Mayor of Augusta, for those here locally, 5 commissioners. And, you know, when you get down really to the local level there, you're talking about a wide variety of things that we have to vote for. I mean, all the way down to what day of the week and how often your garbage is picked up. I mean, things that, you know, affect your quality of life. I mean, as far as, you know, as far as the General Assembly goes, they are elected every 2 years. And so voters every 2 years have an opportunity to go in and vote or run for office if they're dissatisfied with who currently holds that seat. So, and Congress as well. So it's a great opportunity to vote in impactful races, and they shouldn't be taken for granted.
All right, thank you, Lynn. And Corey, you want to add on to that?
I would just echo some of the same sentiments. I'm not going to be long. I think, you know, we kind of all touched on areas that's very significant of midterm elections. I've been a product of pretty much, I know at least 3 midterm elections, and I understand how important they are. And I try to educate the citizens on how important it is to go to the polls and make sure that they have the right representation for them, because we directly impact their day-to-day lives. You know, we people that they're going to run into in the grocery store, at church, you know, at meetings or what have you. So people need to understand that it's critically important, because the things, as Lynn Bailey said, you know, about the price of your garbage, you know, pickup and potholes, roads that need to be resurfaced, infrastructure on county and city maintained roads. All those things are very important. Also, you know, recruiting small, you know, well, not just small businesses, but any business, you know, these are what the local elected officials do, and not just here locally, but even statewide. So they are very important elections, and it's important that just as much they go to the polls and vote for the president, they need to make sure they do the same thing for the mayor, the commission, school board, and the governor, you know, and we need to continue to push that every single day, because they need to understand that no election is not important.
All right, and then we're going to wrap this question up finally with Pastor Goodman.
Yes, to echo what everyone else has said, every election is important. I do want to encourage people who are watching that our vote is important. Your vote is your voice. But as I tell everyone, your vote is not absent of accountability, which means that you should inform yourself about the candidate. Just because I vote for someone does not mean that I'm not going to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that we do that. We have responsibility, and that's our right as citizens of the United States of America and citizens of our state and of our local area. I would also say that not only vote, but as we see in so many, one of the things we also need to do is we need to get some people ready to run. There are a lot of people who are passionate about different things. We need to get more people, especially from our communities, not just involved in the voting process, but we also need them in the process to be on ballots, to run for these things. We do a good job of complaining about some things, rightfully so. And at the end of the day, if we're not at the table, then we're going to miss out on a whole lot. And I think that's one of the things that we have not done well in our community, because I believe that you need duality. You need people in the streets and you need people at the table. And so with these midterm elections and local elections and state elections and all that stuff, we need to make sure we go out and vote, but we also need to make sure that we're getting people in the process to be put on the ballot, to run, so they can have their voice as well. That's one thing that I really have been seeing, because a lot of times we complain about who's running when we need to put people out there. And so this is the time to do it. Be engaged, fully engaged. And I think this is the process, but we can't wait to 2022. You have to start now, make the plan now, start registering people now, say what's important now, who are the candidates now. You know, it's unfortunate that when we have these candidate forums and other things, it's not really attended. And so you don't know what people's platform is. And unfortunately, politics now has become a blood sport. And I'm not sure when it's going to get back to being the congenial type of way that it is. I don't think we're there anymore. I think we're at a blood sport. I think the last few years has really just put a real chasm and shift in politics. And now you're going to have to really be engaged in the process, because if we're not careful, we're going to miss it. And these legislatures are coming through, these policies are coming through, that if we're not careful, pretty soon we're going to look up and see, hey, what happened? It's because we
Right.
didn't vote. We weren't part of the process.
A fantastic point. Thank you, Pastor Goodman. And I want to remind everybody, as you maybe some of you are just coming on the call or came in after we did our little housekeeping rules, but I want to remind you, if you have a question, use the Q&A feature instead of the chat feature. We're looking for the questions in the Q&A feature instead of the chat feature. That being said, I want to direct this next question to you, Lynn Bailey. What is the process to throw out votes, and who makes that decision?
Throw out votes. You know, let's talk about absentee ballots.
Okay.
So with absentee ballots by mail, you know, it used to be all hinged upon the signature or whether or not we could validate that ballot or not. Now there will be different criteria. As far as mail-in ballots go, the ballots will either meet the criteria that they have to meet in order to be validated, or they won't. And so if the ballot can't be brought up and the deficiencies cured, then there would be no choice but to reject it. Outside of that, I think the other thing to look at is provisional ballots. Provisional ballots are ballots that are cast by people who maybe they go to the wrong precinct, or maybe they think they're registered to vote, but actually they're not registered to vote. So it's their safety net, I guess, their fail-safe ballot in a way to vote. The Board of Elections looks at all of those and decides whether or not we can find enough evidence to support the voter's claim that their ballot should count. But here's what everyone needs to be on the lookout for. We talked earlier, Pastor Goodman, you were talking about the voter registration efforts that you all are pushing forward with, and I think other groups are as well. And I would encourage you, in addition to getting people registered to vote, also encourage people to keep their addresses up to date with us. That's just as important. With this new law, voters, except during the hours between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. won't be able to vote out of precinct anymore. That's a big change. We, for the last 4 or 5 years, basically you could go to your polling place anytime on election day and tell the poll worker you don't have time to get to your polling place and vote a ballot there wherever you are. But that's not going to be available anymore. It's going to be very limited. So it's going to be important that people get to the right place on election day, know how to find their polling place, and they keep their addresses updated. Outside of that, I really can't think of situations where ballots are thrown out. It's a deliberate process we go through with every single ballot, because we want to count every ballot that we can count, but they have to meet the legal criteria in order for us to do it.
All right, thank you, Lynn. I want to ask this question, let me throw it out there first, and then I'll go to someone on the panel. Can someone please explain or talk about the changes that need to occur to address this particular issue in the 34th state with laws that disenfranchise people convicted of felonies, even after they have completed their sentences? Can somebody speak to that issue? Representative Howard, you wanna take that one?
I'll do my best. Lynn could probably do a better job, but from what I know, if a person is what they said, still on paper, then they can't vote. But once they are out of prison, and as most people again said, not on paper, then they are eligible to vote just because they had a felony 10 years ago and they are cleared and served their time. They've done all of their probationary parole, then they're eligible to vote. Am I correct with that, Lynn?
Yes, sir, you are. Georgia is one of those states that as long as you're serving your felony sentence, and that would include probation, parole, fines, and you have to be completely cleared. But once you are, that right to vote is automatically restored to you in Georgia, unlike some states in which you may never get your right to vote back, period, depending on what the offense was. But in Georgia, you do. Now, that does not mean, though, that you're automatically registered to vote. So once everything is cleared up and you're good to go, a person would still need to re-register to vote to get back on the books. But yes, sir, that is the way it works in Georgia.
All right, would anyone else like to address that question? All right, okay, go ahead, Lynn.
Here, I was just gonna just say one other thing. It's kind of on subject. I guess in 2018, Georgia changed its laws so that a voter or a citizen who is in jail but awaiting trial, so they've not been convicted, they can still vote. But the challenge has been, how do you vote? You know, we have to send the ballot to the address at the time, to the address that the person was registered to vote from. Obviously, that person is not there if they're incarcerated, so it was difficult for them to get a ballot. So the law was changed, and now we're allowed to send ballots directly to the detention center or jail where a person's being held. Also, employees of the jail are permitted to deliver the ballots to us, to our office. So there's a little better opportunity for people under those circumstances, because it really was nearly impossible for a person awaiting trial, not yet convicted, to get a ballot in the past.
All right, thank you, Lynn.
Yes, ma'am.
As we talk about the collective efforts that would make it easier for people to vote under the new, if this new voter registration stands, what are some of the things that maybe Fair Count did to galvanize particular groups so that there's one concerted effort moving in the same direction rather than 10 different organizations doing 10 different things? What are some of the rules of engagement for collaboration to see this move forward? And I'm going to address that to Reggie.
So I think one of the most important things from the very beginning was making sure that Fair Count was coming into a place asking, in what way can we help? We wanted to make sure that we were meeting people where they are and talking with groups who had been doing the work on the ground long before Fair Count was even founded, to just find out, in what ways can we help, or what ways can we be of service? In doing that, we also were finding out a lot about the specific area, insofar as like which groups do a lot of the different works. A lot of our elected officials and our community leaders pointed us to the folks who were like, hey, you need to make sure you're talking to X, Y, and Z. They may not have they may not have like an official or elected title, but they're the ones that we go to for information. They're the ones that we go to for drives to make sure everything is moving and moving in the right way. And we work with them consistently to make sure we get all the information out to people. Another thing that we did was just, insofar as like organizations, being very deliberate to make sure when we say meeting people where we're at, if something's not broken, not trying to fix it. Hey, if this has worked for the last few decades, years, everything else like that to get folks out, all we want to do is find out, does it work? Would it be helpful if we help to scale this up to like a larger scale to possibly reach out to more people? Would it be helpful if as one organization is going into one neighborhood, we may have the opportunity to go into another, so that there's not double work? You know, like, in what ways can we actually be helpful on the ground to plug into the existing work that's already being done and the existing people who've been doing this work for so very long, so that we can be very effective? And we've just been very fortunate and blessed that so many different churches, organizations, nonprofits, elected leaders, community leaders have been just open to certainly working with us, but just showing us like, hey, here is where we could certainly need this help, and this is how we can continue to move forward. So we've been just very, very fortunate in running into that.
All right, thank you so much, Reggie. Would anyone else like to address that question? If not, We have one final question. Did the proposal to notarize applications for an absentee ballot make it into the final bill SB 202?
It did
Lynn,
not.
would you like to? Okay,
It did not. That's not a requirement in Georgia.
okay, thank you, Lynn.
Sure.
I'm getting a little choked up right now. Any more questions? We'll take some final questions in Q&A. All right. And if there are no questions right now, I'm gonna turn it over to Matthew Frazier to talk about the survey.
All right, and this is the survey portion. On behalf of the 100 Black Men of Augusta, we'll be giving away some prizes. Coach Bryant, maybe you can give a little bit more detail on what we're giving away for the survey.
Yes, Vice President Frazier, I'll be glad to. The 100 Black Men, sponsored by Coca-Cola and the Kia grant, will give 6 $100 gift certificates away. And we will give them to people participating in the survey. One of our deliverables for receiving the grant was that we would take a survey and get feedback from those on this webinar as participants. So please, once Mr. Frazier gives you that survey information, go on and fill out your survey, and we randomly select 6 numbers of those people filling out those surveys, and we will provide you the $100 certificate, and that'll be something nice for you guys to have. And I know everybody likes to have a little money, and so we're very excited about being able to do this. So Mr. Frazier will give you the information, go to the survey, and then Moderator Beth, during that time that people are filling out the survey, I would ask that you have the panelists give any closing remarks that they may have.
All right. If you look into the chat box, you will be able to see that survey. So please, as Coach Bryant and Vice President Frazier said, fill out the survey. They need it in support of the deliverables on behalf of Coca-Cola. As you complete your survey, I would love to hear from our esteemed group of panelists with their closing remarks. We will start with you, Reggie Abraham. Of course, if those of you that joined us a little bit late, Reggie is the National Campaign Chair for Fair Count. And Reggie, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of my fellow panelists. Thank you to all of you all for just joining us. I'll just be real brief. Certainly being just participating on every single level, everything that we've said, just please making sure as we are seeing more about these changes that people are being informed. You certainly can get more information in a variety of different ways as it pertains to Fair Count. I would definitely refer everyone to our website at faircount.org. But also Fair Count has within it a program that I'm fortunate to be the lead of called Black Men Count. And this program is specifically attuned towards Black men, making sure that we're getting information out. Certainly, we were doing this since the census, but 100% as it pertains to voting, redistricting, and just civil engagement in general. So certainly with faircount.org, and you can also visit us at blackmencount.org as we get more information up about how people can just continue to be civically engaged. And for upcoming events that we'll be doing as well, certainly going forward in the next few weeks and going into the fall in the next year. Thank you so much again for inviting me.
All right, thank you so much, Reggie. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We will now hear closing remarks from Representative Wayne Howard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panelists here. I'm honored to be on here with you. And also thank you to 100 Black Men for putting this together. And, you know, this is going to be needed, much needed, as we go into the 2022 election cycle for a governor, for other local elections. That's what we call the midterm election. So let's show the world that Georgia is not only making news for a presidential election and a senator's election. Let's let the world know that Georgia is actively involved into elections for our local leaders as well. And we look forward to being a part of the voter participation that's going to be needed, and to make sure that we don't allow these distractions and stumbling blocks, obstacles to stop us from voting. We will overcome whatever obstacle it's put in front of us, and we're gonna prove it that can be done regardless of what you put in front of us. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you, Representative Howard. We will hear closing remarks right now from Ms. Lynn Bailey, the Executive Director for the Richmond County Board of Elections. And Chills, take a look at the link for the survey. I'm getting some responses back. People are having some difficulties. But
Yeah, we just updated the link, so
Okay.
it's up and working now.
all right, thank you. All right, Lynn.
Well, Sheriff, thank you. And thank you for the group for inviting me to be a part of it. It's been my honor and privilege really to be here. I hope that some of the information that I've shared will be helpful. I would ask that people keep in mind that the local boards of elections are there to provide information and to help navigate through these changes that we know will come in some form. There will be some type of change somehow before it's over with. And the last thing I'd just like to mention, because we haven't really talked about it, we know that with absentee ballots by mail, while it doesn't in every instance require a copy of a photo ID, a person does at least have to have that ID number to put on the forms and whatnot. So you could say, I think you should say that an ID is required in that you at least have to have that number. So keep in mind that through the Department of Driver Services, a person can get a free ID card if they sign an affidavit that they're indigent. They can get that free ID card that's basically like the Georgia driver's license. And also that every elections office in the state of Georgia makes free ID cards for voting purposes for people who may not otherwise have an ID to vote. And so those are good options that are available to people. But that type of information is information that you can get from your local elections office. So I encourage people to take advantage, leverage those offices, and let us help navigate through the system. And with that, again, I'll thank you for allowing me to be a part of the discussion. And we stand ready to help in any way we can, particularly with voter education.
Lynn, that's some great information, and I would venture to say a lot of people don't know that. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And of course, Corey, we would like to hear your closing remarks.
Yes, again, thank you, Sheriff, for definitely moderating this panel and this event tonight. Being a member of the 100 Black Men and also a former elected official, I will tell you it's so important that we continue to educate the citizens on how important it is to vote and why they should go the extra mile to do what's necessary to make sure their vote is casted. We have so many elections that have been lost, and Pastor Goodman alluded to this earlier, not even having, people or the right people in office can be a real detriment to this community. But it's important that we make sure that people get out there and cast their vote. You can't take it for granted and just think that, okay, once you vote one time, that's it. You don't have to go back out. This next year is going to be very challenging, but I think as some of the other panelists alluded to earlier, we start now preparing, especially for those in underserved and underserviced communities, to make sure that they have the proper, credentials to go ahead and cast their votes when the time comes. I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised, or lack thereof, if you will, for those who were thinking that this was going to suppress some of the voters' opportunity to get out and cast their vote, but they're going to be surprised on the outcome of what's going to happen in 2022. So we won't lay down, we won't relax, we will continue to forge forward. We'll continue to educate through forums like this, continue to get literature out to people and make sure they understand what's at stake and what's needed, but make sure they understand what they need to do to make sure they can participate. And again, I just like to thank everybody for being here tonight and also being a part of this panel. And I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thank you all so very much for joining us tonight. When I do these Zoom calls, I know that all of us are Microsoft Teamed and Zoomed out, but because we can't be there in person, give you a big round of applause. Allow me to just give you a big round of applause. Some great information shared tonight. A lot of information that I did not know, and I've been living in this community since I was a little girl up to being a cheerleader at Augusta College with Coach Bryant. So thank you so very much for taking your time and your talents and sharing your knowledge with those of us that are very interested in what happens in our community. On behalf of iHeartMedia and 96.3 KISS FM, I want to thank Coach Bryant and of course Chills and the esteemed group here of the 100 Black Men of Augusta that continue to strive and provide excellence for our community, our children, and our families. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to host the panel discussion tonight. And I see Representative Howard has something he'd like to share.
I want to say one thing, unrelated to elections. This community has lost an icon, and in this community, in the name of Robert Flash Gordon. And let's be in prayer with his family, and that they will get through this with peace. I just had to get that in, Chair.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Representative Howard. And
Chair,
with that, yes, sir.
Chair, I think we ought to respect our president, Larry Dewar. He finally got on. I know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry.
Words, yes.
Absolutely. President of the 100 Black Men of Augusta. I'm sorry.
Well, good evening.
President Durr.
Yeah, well, good evening. I had some technical difficulties there, and it happened. I had a tech in the house, and he was able to get me back on. And I was supposed to do a little welcoming, but on the behalf of the 100s, we do like to welcome everybody to this town hall meeting. I'd like to thank our sponsors, iHeartRadio, IKEA, and Coca-Cola. Also would like to thank the panelists and the moderator for putting on this town hall meeting for us. And I also like to thank the people that are tuned in. And I hope that the information that was given was informative. And last of all, I'd like to thank my two committees for putting on a very good town hall meeting. So thank you so very much, everyone. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Larry. And I'll, of course, turn it over to Coach Clint Bryant, the Vice President of the 100 Black Men of Augusta. Over to you, Clint.
Thank you, Cher. Again, you knocked it out of the park. We appreciate, Cher, all that you do at iHeartRadio and leadership on the Ivy, and you're working with Minnesota Fats over the years. Every time this community needs something, you guys always stand up. And I'd like to thank you for that. I appreciate the help of our local TV stations, Jay Jeffries at Fox 54, Scott Illich at News Channel 6, and Richard Rogers at News Channel 12 for making sure that the word got out to people. We are very fortunate to have the sponsorship and the support of both IKEA and Coca-Cola to help us deal with these social issues. We have a saying in the 100 is that what our kids see is what they will be.
Absolutely.
And we've been able to do a number of things here recently with these town halls. And I think one of the things coming out of this pandemic that we will realize across the country, that we don't have to always be in person to meet, that we have things like this in order to meet. And so we are really there's some really serious stuff happening with the 100 under the leadership of our president, Larry Durr. And I think this community is starting to see it, everything from vaccinations to COVID tests, along with awareness about issues of social issues like we're dealing with now with election and registration and education, and also the things that we're doing as it relates to mental health and some things that we'll be doing. So mental health and wellness is one of the things we deal with with the 100. We often talk about economic empowerment, education, mentorship, and all of this. We as the 100 want to be a positive influence in this community, and I thank each of you. Reggie, you and I have gotten to know each other over the last few months, and of course, Wayne Howard, Lynn Bailey, and Corey Johnson, and all of us have been friends for a number of years. So I appreciate you taking out your time to help us with this. At this time, Chair, I would like to announce the winners of the 6 cards that we're going to give, the gift cards. We have your address, your email address, and we'll be contacting you and getting a telephone number, and we get a physical address so we can put this certificate in your hand. I'd like to congratulate first Jurice Kofer, Jurice Kofer. The next is Judah Doty, Judahdoty. The third is Rhonda France, like the country France, Rhonda. The fourth, Glenda Staten, Staten, Staten. The fifth is Marion Brown, and the sixth is Dominique Gaston. So again, congratulations to Junice Kofer, Judah Doty, Rhonda France, Glenda Staten, Marion Brown, and Dominique Gaston. These $100 gift certificates were provided to you by IKEA. Remember them when you go out and do business, and Coca-Cola. Remember when you go and buy soft drinks, what Coca-Cola is doing for us. I think this is a very interesting time. I think this virtual town hall will have a follow-up. But basically what we've been seeing around the country today is a number of major corporations, Delta, Coca-Cola, Viacom, CBS, all spoke out against the legislation that was just passed, Representative Howard. And there is some discussion that maybe the Major League Baseball All-Star game might not be in Atlanta now. So we all know that when we make decisions like this, like the one made in North Carolina a couple of years ago, dealing with gender, restrooms and bathrooms for LGBTQ and transgender, that made a difference in the pocketbook. So those things, this will be a part of a greater discussion. I think Pastor Goodman made one great point that I put in my wheelbox earlier. He said, encouraging all of us to try to find talented young people and people in our community to be servants and to become like our own Corey Johnson and get themselves as an elected official. And no matter where that is, I was disappointed, Lynn, I'll tell you that we only had a little under 10,000 people vote with the recent SPLOST. As big a deal as that is, the millions of dollars that that's going to bring to our community, and we only had 10,000 citizens feel the necessity to go and vote. We're going to change that here in Augusta, Richmond County, and our surrounding areas about getting people educated. So again, on behalf of the 100 and our president, Larry Durr, and our membership, and special thanks to you, Dr. Rodell Lawrence, and all of you. Thank you for being with us. And you guys, we're going to give you about 9 minutes back to yourself. And thank you so very much. And I hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, panel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.